6 o'clock in the evening, and we're beginning this evening's session with a public hearing, actually 3 public hearings, 3 matters for public hearing, after which we'll adjourn each one in turn after we've gone through the entire procedure. But just by way of explanation for people online and people that are in attendance for the public hearing, this is not part of the council meeting. This is not a session during which councillors debate. This is a session during which councillors listen to the presenter and have an opportunity to ask any clarifications of the presenter, and then to hear from any member of the public who wishes to comment, following which the applicant, if the applicant is present, would be able to come to the mic and also present, following which we would then close the public hearing if there were no questions of clarification from council. The other thing to bring to your attention is the fact that it not being a council meeting but rather a public hearing is that council is here in the capacity, as I said, to hear the presentations and the nature of the application and any objections or comments in favor. And in that capacity, if a councillor is not present at this table to hear all of the comments made with respect to the public hearing, then that councillor is not permitted to vote or debate on the matter when it comes to actual council session. So with that being clear, the first item, I'll call the public hearing to order, and the first item is item A, application to rezone a portion of a property actually, on Hilts Road in Garland. And here to present the application to council is Mr. Fredericks. Mr. Fredericks, when you're ready, sir. There you go, your mic is on.
Thanks very much, and good evening. I would clarify that we're talking about a portion of multiple properties, not just one in this case. So we've got a planning application from Rodenizer Salvage, which is a long-established industrial business that's been operating in the County of Kings for decades. They have requested to rezone portions of a few of their properties on Hilts Road from the rural mixed-use, or A2 zone, to the rural industrial M3 zone. And this would recognize the existing industrial use of a type of salvage yard on these properties. So Rodenizer Salvage, again, has been operating for many, many years. They're defined as a salvage and scrap operation under the County of Kings land use bylaw. They are a legal, non-conforming use that predates municipal land use regulations, so they've been there for that long. They've requested again to rezone portions of their properties from the A2, from the A2 zone to the rural industrial M3 zone. Their operation involves scrap collection and sorting and recycling, and it spans across multiple properties. It's the type of business that requires a lot of holding space, holding yards, and they own 5 properties in the area, and the operation does span across several of those. So the business was started by Eric Rodenizer and is now operated by his children and brothers, Kevin and Darren. And it's Kevin who's applied for this rezoning application, but also concurrent provincial approval to operate a commercial salvage facility. And it's important to note that this type of operation is regulated by the municipality in terms of a land use. It's also regulated by the province of Nova Scotia in terms of various spill hazard mitigation and pollution control. So this is one of these situations where we've got dual jurisdictions controlling something. So we're located on just off of Highway 360. If you were to go north of Berwick, Hilts Road is on your right-hand side. And we're up on the North Mountain. Here we find lots of large kind of rural properties. And again, the applicants own 5 properties in this area that total over 100 acres. But again, only a portion of these properties are needed for the business, And so these properties include a variety of structures, an office building shown here, and beside that is a dwelling. And the dwelling would be left in the A2 zone. So we're not looking to create another non-conforming situation. We're looking to avoid the residential dwellings with the industrial zoning. So that's why we're talking about portions of properties, or partially why we're doing that. So there's an office, a garage, and 2 existing dwellings. There's a variety of cleared land and fenced area shown here. This is the sort of main deconstruction facility where they would bring in a car, for example, or other kind of equipment and strip it into its sort of its more raw components, be that metal or plastic, stainless steel, a variety of metals components. So there's a lot of separation and buffering existing on this use. It's fairly rural and quite far set back from the main road. But there are certainly rural residential uses within this community, and they're not too far away. It does have about 200 feet of wooded area between the primary operation and those dwellings, and a separation distance of about 400 feet. So it's relatively well separated. The red outlines show 4 of those properties that they own. And gives you a sense of how rural this area is. It's certainly some agriculture in the area, but a lot of forested land. And they currently kind of store some of their material, be it stainless steel or other types of metals and plastics, in some of these cleared areas further down Hiltz Road on this property. But again, most of the kind of operation and certainly the office facilities are located down here. Hiltz Road itself is considered an I-class road, which is certainly a lower priority type of street than Highway 1 or certainly Highway 360. It is not easily passable, but with most cars, and there's really nothing that fronts on Hiltz Road other than these few properties here. It's otherwise quite rural. It does provide access to farm fields and some forestry operations, but there are otherwise no dwellings or businesses that locate on it. The properties are currently zoned A2, or rural mixed use, as is most of the surrounding property area. And again, the request is to go to the rural industrial or M3 zone, and the purpose of this zone is to provide for development of industrial type uses that may support agriculture, forestry, fishing, and other types of industries. And these types of zones are usually used for land uses that require a lot of land, or require a lot of separation and buffering. And these are easily found in rural areas, but more difficult to find in industrial parks or more urban settings, like growth centers. And so they often are supported by policy to locate in the rural areas. And certainly agriculture, forestry, and fishing, these types of industries themselves require a type of industrial use that may be in line with the roadnizer salvage operation. Old vehicles or older equipment that may have served their purpose can be recycled at this facility. And further into the planning strategy, we find that there is a policy that allows council to consider rezonings from the A2 zone or other zones. But specifically in this case, we're looking to rezone from the A2 zone to the rural industrial zone. And in evaluating these types of proposals, council looks to see that it will not negatively impact nearby agricultural operations or create some conflict with rural residents. And while there may be some conflict with this, it's a well-established business that's been there for many years, and hasn't created a tremendous amount of problem. Certainly from an agricultural perspective, the surrounding farmland is owned by one family, and they didn't express any kind of concern with this proposal. The other criteria that we look at are limiting the rezoning area. So we don't usually apply M3 zoning to an entire property, but we use a type of analysis that reduces that size and minimizes the industrial zone just to the area that's reasonably required to accommodate the kind of proposal. We also make sure that it meets any additional rezoning criteria, and those are shown here. This policy has been met in this case, and it really looks to ensure that this property hasn't been used for agriculture or doesn't have the capacity for agricultural use. And in this case, it was identified on the 2012 land cover map, but we found that that was in error or miscalculated as an agricultural use. But this policy looks to see that we're trying to avoid agricultural areas, and this is an industrial property that's certainly been used for industry or industrial uses for many years. And the agricultural specific kind of policies here look to, again, ensure that we're not rezoning more land than is required, and again, not creating undue conflict with agricultural uses or rural residents. And again, meeting the general land use bylaw criteria. These general criteria also consider land use compatibility, site suitability, impact on well fields, and again, that potential for land use conflict. And so industrial uses in rural areas are not always welcomed, and we do want to ensure that we find some reasonable middle ground, particularly when we've got an existing industrial use. And we feel like we've achieved that by creating a reduced zone boundary. So again, these are the properties themselves, and the rezoning area is only covering a portion of these. The operation is also currently on this property, and so we've sort of constrained or reduced the operation onto fewer properties, and restricted some of that ability for this use to spread any further. In terms of the process, we did receive some feedback from the public initially on this application. We heard letters and phone calls and emails about some of the pollution that has occurred. Things have blown off of this site and into the woods or into the ditches of these roads. And these issues are certainly important to the people in this community. And it's our hope that through regulating this currently unregulated operation, that we see some reduction in pollution through both the land use bylaw requirements and the provincial approval process as well. We expect that there'll be further, or there will be the introduction of more regulations that will reduce that pollution potential. So we sent letters again to those same folks advertising this public hearing. We placed ads in the newspaper. Didn't receive any written confirmation or any written submissions. And for council's benefit, the statutory requirements have been met, and it's scheduled for second reading later this evening. And with that, I'd pass it to Mr. Mayor for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fredericks. Are there any questions of clarification from any members present for Mr. Fredericks? I don't see any from anyone else. Mr. Fredericks, can you give me a concept of the gross area that we're talking about? I'm looking at the Appendix A that accompanies the presentation.
Certainly, it's approximately 16 acres in terms of the rezoned area.
Is that the so the area that's closest to Highway 360? What area is that? What's the area of that, rather?
I would have to approximate here, but probably around 6 acres.
And the back area?
The back is about 10.
About 10. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And the comment regarding it doesn't have the capacity to be farmland, but there's an adjacent farm use immediately.
Yes, and through you, I should clarify, it's not, the measurement or the criteria is not the measurement of potential for agricultural use, but that it have been used for agriculture in the past. So I misspoke there.
Okay, thank you. Any questions arising from my questions? No? Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this particular application? No member of the public wishing to comment. Is the Is the applicant here? Does the applicant wish to comment? No? All right, then that concludes this public hearing regarding this particular matter, and I declare the public hearing on this matter adjourned. And we'll move to item B, which I understand is being brought to us by Ms. Ullman, is that correct? And this is the application to rezone the property at 1070 Central Avenue in Greenwood, BID 55-109-250. Ms. Ullman, when you're ready.
Thank you. Alicia Wack, on behalf of Greenwood Recycling, has submitted a land use bylaw map amendment to rezone from the mixed commercial C3 zone, the residential 1 and 2 unit R2 zone, and the residential mixed density R3 zone to the general commercial C1 zone. The proposal would permit a storefront recycling use. Through the adoption of the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw, the zoning general commercial C1 zone was changed to the mixed commercial C3 zone, making the existing use non-conforming. The business must be conforming with the land use bylaw to be able to renew their provincial permits. So this is the approximate location at 1070 Central Avenue in Greenwood. This is the subject property. The property is located within the Greenwood Growth Center and is located across the road from the Greenwood Mall. The subject property has a lot area of approximately 37,807 square feet. There is 163 feet of road frontage, and the public currently access the storefront recycling use off of Central Ave, and the loading access is located off of Rock Notch Road. The existing building is located towards the back of the property, and the parking is located in front of the building, in between the road and the building. The developed areas of the property are relatively flat, and the undeveloped area on the back of the property is wooded and has some topographical issues. It's not very flat there. A site visit was conducted on October 13th, 2022, and no issues were noted. So this is the zoning map. There are currently multiple zones applied to this property, including the mixed commercial residential zone, the residential 1 and 2 unit zone, and the residential mixed density zone. The site is the location of the Greenwood recycling store, and the existing storefront recycling use is not permitted in this mixed commercial residential zone, thereby requiring a rezoning to the general commercial zone. So this is the future land use map. As you can see, it also sits within 2 designations. It sits within the residential designation and the commercial designation. For policy review, the enabling municipal planning policies, the application concerns the proposed rezoning of land from current mixed commercial residential zone, residential 1 and 2 unit zone, and the residential mixed density zone to the general commercial. The policies contained within the municipal planning strategy enable council to consider this application. The subject property is, as I stated, within the commercial and residential designations, and within the commercial designation, the C1 zone is enabled. The subject property is also less than 5 acres, and it is adjacent to commercial designation. 5.3.5, council shall consider in relation to all applications the applicable zone placement. So the proposed rezoning is consistent with the zone intent and placement. The impact of the proposed commercial rezoning is considered compatible with the surrounding commercial zoning. The other permitted uses would also be appropriate in this location, where general commercial zoning is located on the opposite side of Central Avenue, which is considered a main transportation route. The commercial designation goal is to identify lands where commercial activities are promoted and prioritized over other lands. economic development to develop and expand commercial, retail, and service uses, and to promote and encourage entrepreneurship and innovation. The proposed rezoning is consistent with promoting commercial activities and promotes and encourages entrepreneurship within the community. For the general commercial policy, 3.2.1, designate as commercial lands located within a growth center where commercial uses are encouraged and prioritized over other lands. So the placement of zones within a designation is intended to control the location of different land uses. The zone placement reflects the policy intent for each zone and the development pattern of communities at the time the zone was applied. The general commercial policy continued is to establish and follow commercial zones in the land use bylaw. So general commercial lands located in this zone are intended to accommodate a very wide range of commercial uses, as well as limited residential opportunities and low-packed industrial developments along main transportation corridors. And as I noted, Central is considered a main transportation corridor. Within the Greenwood Secondary Plan, policies pertain primarily to water supply management and transportation. So there are no policies relevant to this application because it is an existing storefront and no changes are being made. In terms of the general criteria, the proposal is keeping with the municipal planning strategy and the applicable goals, objectives, and policies contained within it. It also fits within the Greenwood Secondary Plan. The proposal does not have any development costs to the municipality as the business is existing. The land use does not generate complaints related to the current operation, and as a result, staff are not concerned about the compatibility with neighboring uses. The site is not located within the Greenwood wellfield, and it is suitable because it was an existing use on the property. For this application, a public information meeting was not required because the property is less than 1 acre in total area. 16 properties were notified about the public hearing. We have received no comments. The file was presented to PAC on December 13th, and council gave first reading January 3rd.
Thank you, Ms. Ullman. Is this your first presentation to council? Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should have welcomed you when you first came up. Are there any questions of clarification to the presenter from council? I see none. Ms. Ullman, I think they gave you an easy one to start with. Okay. Are there any representations from the public? I see none. Is the applicant present? No. Then all of that being covered, I declare the public hearing on this matter to be closed, and thank you for your presentation. The next item, Mr. Watson is here to address, and that has to do with the Growth Center of New Minas Secondary Planning Strategy. Mr. Watson, whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, everyone. I guess everybody's out on dates tonight, but what's a better date than coming to a public hearing? My name is Ian Watson, Senior Planner for Upland Planning and Design. We've been working with the municipality for the Vision New Minas project, Growth Center New Minas Secondary Plan. Just as a reminder, what this project's all about, it's to develop a secondary plan for the Growth Center of New Minas, and within that, develop an overall vision for the community, specific to the community, and policies and directions tailored to the needs of New Minas on things like housing, commercial servicing, active transportation, and particularly also the expansion lands, or New Minas South. So this map shows the current boundary of the Growth Center of New Minas. It includes both the kind of established area that you would think of as New Minas, and also almost 1,000 acres south of Highway 101, which I'll call New Minas South for the purposes of tonight. And a bit of project history. In 2013, the Utility and Review Board, the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board, confirmed expansion for the village of New Minas, that being the municipal unit village. And at the time, the municipality of Kings was going through the process of developing a new municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. And eventually in 2019, when those came into effect, the new planning documents recognized the change to the village boundary with a similar change to the growth center. However, at the time, detailed planning for that expansion area was, kind of perhaps one thing too many in the scope of the overall plan project. So policy was put in to support further work in this area. And following the adoption of the new planning documents in late 2019, Council initiated a project to look specifically at a secondary plan for New Minas. In early 2020, we were hired to assist with that. All along the way, this project has been guided by a working group that consists of 2 municipal councillors, 3 village commissioners, 4 citizens that were appointed by the village, and 3 that were appointed by the municipality, and they helped with representing the work in the public, listening at public engagement, and having a lot of really good discussions around policy and direction of where these documents should go. For those of you who haven't been in the New Minas South area, it's mostly wooded. Much of it's secondary growth forest, but there are some areas of old growth hemlock. Much of it's quite beautiful. There are old roads through the area. And then a major feature is 2 large high tension or high voltage power line corridors that also feature a number of informal recreation trails, ATV trails, that kind of thing. Another big defining feature of the area is that it's quite sloped and quite an elevation. So the dark blue colors are almost at sea level, and then you get up into 160, 170 meters above sea level with a slope that looks down over Highway 101 over the developed area in New Minas and all the way towards the North Mountain. So this work was a major piece of work, and to really support the working group and eventually PAC and Council in decision making, we commissioned a series of 3 studies through this, and 1 was done prior for servicing. There was a market demand technical study that looked at the needs for residential growth, industrial lands, and commercial space, and noting that there's a need for residential growth and some need for commercial growth to support that. There was as I mentioned, a utility system assessment that was created just prior to undertaking this work, looking at the existing utilities in New Minas, sewer, water, and stormwater, and identifying areas for upgrades or deficiencies and capacity. And in general, the systems are, they have the capacity to accommodate any growth within a reasonable scope, with upgrades as necessary, but nothing out of the ordinary or over the top in terms of upgrades. One thing that the study did mention is that the area south of Highway 101, as you saw, is quite sloped. The soils there are very shallow. There are already stormwater issues in that part of New Minas, just north of Highway 101. And so that study did flag that anything that happens south of Highway 101, there's a potential there for increased stormwater runoff, so we really need to be mindful of that. There was an urban design and active transportation study looking at the character of New Minas, trying to characterize that, and setting out some objectives for things like housing diversification, walkable commercial street, protecting natural systems, and a lot of specific details that helped inform the land use bylaw development. And finally, there was a transportation study that looked at developing a transportation model for New Minas. So they did traffic counts at intersections and then modeled what would happen if you added new development into it. And so it's provided some recommendations for improvements to the system, looked at New Minas South and what the impact of that would be, and determined that it could be accommodated with some reasonable upgrades. And then also put some Class D, that's high-level costing, on the collector road network for New Minas South. This was a fairly substantial project, so there was a number of phases of engagement throughout. Unfortunately, this kind of hit right at the start of COVID-19, and so it certainly required adjustment in terms of engagement. So we had phase one where we were looking at kind of visioning. We sent out flyers to every residential address in New Minas, had an online event, a survey, mapping tool. And some of the key things we heard about from that process was a need for affordability in New Minas, both housing and also business space, how much people value active transportation and open space and want to see investment in that, making New Minas accessible and inclusive, and then really redeveloping and reinvesting in Commercial Street particularly, making it more attractive for pedestrians. We then took the results of that, summarized all the background technical studies, did some in-house analysis on things like slope and all of that, and put together a summary and scenarios report, and then at that time we were able to have small group workshops. We did a bunch of them because they were small, looked at draft guiding principles and key directions, and then some scenarios we put together for different approaches to development. And people had a lot of comments at the time on topics like housing, commercial development, amenities, connectivity, and the environment. We took the results of that. We developed kind of a preferred development concept for New Minas, and then drafted a secondary plan. Took that back out through a survey, an online mapping tool, larger public workshops, notifying all the landowners who would be affected in New Minas South, and then stakeholders who had been talked throughout the process. We came back with a draft to notify them that it was there. And the results of that phase 3 were good support for the approach to Commercial Street in the draft, very strong support for the approach to County Fair Mall, and I'll go into these in a little bit. Appreciating the parks and trails, consideration for pedestrians, mix of uses, supply of housing. And there were concerns at the time about the amount of commercial space. The development concept at the time had high density residential backing on existing residential uses. And so, we went back after this engagement and adjusted things. So that all brings us to the draft secondary plan. I will not read each of these individually, but the plan has 4 key directions, and each of those has, 4 guiding principles, and then each of those have a number of key directions. So the first guiding principle is that New Minas is a place for people. The second is green living, so things like reducing stormwater runoff, connectivity with nature, solar use. The third is a regional destination with a strong business community, continuing to support New Minas as a regional destination for shopping and services, recreational facilities, and encouraging people to stop from the highway and from the Harvest Moon Trail. And then thoughtful development and sustainable services. Certainly any development here is going to require significant investment in infrastructure, so we want to do that thoughtfully in a way that takes advantage of the natural landscape, that is efficient, and that makes the most sense from both an environmental and also a financial sustainable perspective. So, to get more into the details, in terms of major changes that the secondary plan would implement, the first is Commercial Street. The bulk of Commercial Street in New Minas is, or at least the main part of it, is zoned General Commercial C1. So we, going on the feedback that people wanted a more walkable community, a commercial main street that felt more of a downtown. We made tweaks to the commercial C1 zone, general commercial C1 zone, as they apply specifically in the growth center of New Minas. One of those is to implement a maximum front yard, and I'll show some images illustrating that. And the idea of that is to bring buildings closer to the street, create that more sense of enclosure and a sense of, again, that downtown feel. Similarly, a minimum building height of 2 stories, a minimum ground floor height, it's 12 feet. This creates more flexibility, spaces can be switched from retail to residential, which might, or not residential, rather restaurants, which might have different HVAC requirements. Increasing the maximum building height from 55 to 65 feet. I guess they're not that recent anymore, but updates to the building code that allow 6-story wood construction, so this aligns with that. But then to reduce the impact of that, having a step back on the upper floors, and again, I'll illustrate that in a second. So this is an illustration of, kind of the effect of bringing those buildings closer to the street. So currently in the land use bylaw, the C1 zone has a minimum front setback of 20 feet, and that's being maintained through this proposal. However, there's also within New Minas in the C1 zone, the draft includes a maximum setback of 50 feet. So, that leaves room for parking and circulation in front, but certainly brings things closer to the street. And I should emphasize too that that's from the property line, not from the edge of the pavement or the edge of the sidewalk. The property line, the right-of-way is often quite a bit bigger than that. And here's an illustration going from 5 stories with no step back to 6 stories with a step back above the 3rd floor. You get that extra height, but also at the same time reduce the visual impact of that a little bit. There is also specific policy in the draft secondary plan for the County Fair Mall. Obviously, this is a major site within New Minas, both in terms of its size and its location. It's very prominent, and it's likely that the future of that site will be different than what's there now in terms of an enclosed mall. So there is policy to enable redevelopment of that site by development agreement. It's in the C6 zone. And there's policy that encourages, when redeveloping, that there will be consideration for pedestrians through the site, and that there will be a high standard of landscape design and urban design. And the trade-off of that is, kind of the carrot is to enable higher density here, mixed-use development, really do something unique and special for this prominent corner of New Minas. Crossing over to the other side of the highway into New Minas South, as I mentioned, this area, up until now, I didn't mention this, up until now has been in a holding zone, H1 zone, pending detailed planning. The draft secondary plan would provide an avenue for development of this area. It requires comprehensive development by phase. Again, the big issue here is going to be new services, new sewer, water, stormwater management in particular. So we want to do that in a thoughtful manner. So the policy requires comprehensive development involving landowners representing 75% of the land area in a phase, and the development agreement process would look at things like the layout of buildings or the densities of buildings, and particularly things like servicing, stormwater management, and transportation connectivity. So there's the urban structure map that's in the draft secondary plan. So there's 3 phases. So the idea is that each one of these phases would be planned comprehensively, so that things like when the stormwater runs off the top of the hill, there's planning for the infrastructure at the bottom of the hill to accommodate it. And then there's a broad category of land use in there that's guiding what types of development are appropriate where. So lower densities of residential in the west and central south, and then higher densities in the commercial development kind of push towards the east, with the exception of this area backing on the existing residential uses there. The dashed lines are the corridors, power line corridors. It's also worth pointing on this map, there are a number of ravines in New Minas South. These are protected by the O1 zone. There's a lot of old growth hemlock in them, and they're pretty impressive spaces. There's also identified within the plan 2 regional scale parks, one right at the top of the hill in a really beautiful part of the forest and one that's kind of a view park looking down into New Minas. This doesn't preclude smaller parks as part of the subdivision process as well. The draft secondary plan has a active transportation network map, the idea being this is both a guide for the municipality and village in terms of investments in active transportation, but also, particularly in New Minas South, but anywhere in New Minas where development is happening, a guide for where we'd like to see new connections. And this kind of ties into the work that was done with the active Kings County active transportation plan. There's also a conceptual road network map. This isn't expected to be exact, but the idea is, again, as those development agreements are negotiated, that we want to see this level of connectivity in the road network that comes out of any detailed plans. From an active transportation perspective, in the secondary plan, again, there's that AT map. Also, there's a requirement within the C1 zone, or within, yes, the C1 zone in New Minas for bicycle parking. Low numbers, but minimum standards, just like we do for automobiles in terms of bicycle parking spaces, and then a policy requiring sidewalks on both sides of new roads in New Minas. One other major component of the secondary plan that came out of all this, looking at the details of New Minas, was the well fields there. They protect the drinking water supply of New Minas from potential contaminants. Previously, there had been a requirement for multi-unit development in some of the wellfield zones to go via development agreement. Presumably at the time that was a concern about large storage of heating oil. Since then, we've mostly moved away from that in new developments, residential developments, and the development agreement process was a fairly limiting burden for residential development along, for example, Commercial Street. So we have removed that, or we propose to remove that through the draft secondary plan. And also, there was some other land uses that came up from in our consultation that people wanted to have looked at. However, we don't have the expertise to do that. So there's policy support there for, if the village does an updated source water protection plan, those land use tables can be looked at again through that process. And finally, there was a couple of small tweaks to zoning, some industrial properties that were constrained by well fields for industrial purposes, changing them to residential uses, and some specific requests from property owners, as well as small tweaks to the growth center boundary, just to, in this case, align with a stream. So unlike the first two public hearings tonight, this is a change to the municipal planning strategy itself, the overall plan. So, we don't have a list of policies to check that we're in compliance with. We're actually changing the policies themselves. However, the municipal planning strategy does have some kind of broad vision and goal pieces that, it makes sense to make sure any changes here align with that. So looking at things, the MPS statements regarding settlement, transportation, and healthy communities, the proposed secondary plan, I think, does a really good job of aligning with those, enabling things like a range of new housing options, diverse transportation networks within New Minas, and continuing to protect the drinking water supply. The other thing we do need to look at when we are amending the municipal planning strategy is that the Municipal Government Act has a series of statements of provincial interest. These are fairly high-level statements, but all municipal planning strategies must be consistent with them. So we're continuing to comply with the drinking water statement by having the wellfield protection areas. New Minas is not in a flood risk area. This is not impacting agricultural land as defined by the statement of provincial interest. We're promoting the efficient use of existing infrastructure by enabling redevelopment there, as well as through the comprehensive planning for New Minas South. And then, of course, particularly New Minas South, but also in the existing areas of New Minas, having a wide range of housing options. In terms of process, this has been certainly a long, many steps in between here with the working group. But we have gone through PAC, public participation meeting, first reading in January. We are here to a public hearing, and council is scheduled to consider second reading later tonight. Because it is an MPS amendment, this will go to the province again for the review against those statements of provincial interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Are there any questions of clarification of Mr. Watson? Councillor Killam?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question, maybe it's been dealt with, regarding the deforestation of that 1,000 acres of potential development. And has there been a study or any consideration regarding flooding, erosion issues, if indeed there's a mass cutting of trees there, the slope? I had one more after that, but go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Killam. Yeah, certainly that, that is a concern that was flagged by the surfacing study, and myself walking up in that area is the soils are quite thin, the slope is high, the trees are what's holding it all together to some degree. So yeah, stormwater management and the effects of any deforestation are probably one of the biggest issues in thinking about development of New Minas South. And it's one of the reasons why, in going through the secondary plan, we ultimately recommended putting it in the comprehensive development district, so that any development there would go through development agreement. And then in that process, we'd expect to see stormwater management plans for a whole phase. You know, to go back to that phase map, that, for example, if the central phase is getting developed, that would be planned comprehensively, and one of the top items to look at would be that stormwater management, because we know that yes, if trees are going to get cleared, there's going to be higher runoff. That needs to be well thought out and well dealt with. And so through that development agreement process and through having the stormwater management plan, we'd expect that to be adequately addressed.
Thank you. I guess I'll move on to another question. Recently received a letter, I think we all did, regarding from Fire Chief Redmond regarding setbacks, and I didn't know if that had been looked at or planned to be with respect to fire suppression. Yes,
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Killam. Yeah, so as I understand the concern from the letter was the maximum front back setback, and also actually the minimum, which is existing in New Minas, of 20 feet, and concerns about how that may affect the approach to firefighting of any building that's close to the street. And it's certainly something that we considered in throughout this process and with the working group as well. What's the effect of these rules on firefighting? It's a balance when you're writing policy to match up goals of what's the community we want in terms of form and structure versus what are the practical implications of things like firefighting or snow clearing or whatever it may be. It may necessitate a change in approach in some instances. It's not unheard of. Certainly places like Kentville, for example, have many buildings close to the street and have to adjust the approach to firefighting to deal with that. It does, yeah, it comes into the calculation, but I think in the balance of all the different aspects that we're trying to achieve when doing a plan like this, it's one of many.
Thank you. Just getting back to the first issue regarding deforestation, is there a way that in future development that it can be written in regarding the possibility of developers doing selective cutting versus clear cutting? Clear cutting will take everything down, where maybe we can have some diversity saved and all that if we go the selective cutting route. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we didn't include a specific policy regarding that in the draft. The Municipal Government Act does enable you to control tree clearing in relation to development, so it's possible. However, it wasn't something that came up, and we didn't include a policy about it. The big thing that did come up in regard to tree clearing in particular was the ravines. That was a concern we heard a lot during the engagement, and making sure that those being close to water courses and steep slopes weren't disturbed, and those were protected by the environmental open space 01 zone. But broadly, there's no specific policy for that.
Maybe in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions of clarification? Sorry, we both went after.
May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Councillor
Yeah.
Windsor.
I am wondering, further to the letter from the fire chief, did the consultant or staff discuss this letter with the fire chief?
Do you mean subsequent to the letter?
Subsequent to the letter being received,
The letter only came in, what, yesterday or the day before?
it came in on the 12th. It's dated the 12th.
Yeah, so 2 days ago. I expect not, but I stand to be corrected.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Windsor. No, as the chair notes, the letter just came in and we did not have a chance to do that. However, the fire chief was one of the members of the working group and was privy to those discussions all along.
Okay, thank you. Anything further, Councillor, by way of clarification, Councillor Windsor?
No, I appreciate the consultant's remark that the fire chief was privy to those discussions all the way through. It should be clear that he has made this a point all the way through as well.
Yeah, that's for debate, not for clarification, Councillor. Any further questions of clarification? Seeing none, any member of the public here this evening who wishes to comment on the proposal? No member of the public. As Ms. Mosier looked behind her just to ensure that. Then we're at the point where we can formally close the public hearing with respect to this particular matter, and I thank you, Mr. Watson, for your presentation. So that's the last item for public hearing, and I will declare the public hearing writ large to be closed. However, while we're still on the record with respect to the public hearing, I would like it noted on the record that there is only one councillor absent this evening. Physically not here is Councillor Windsor, but of course he's online, so under our present regime he'll be counted as being present. Otherwise, there's only one councillor absent, and that's Councillor Harding. So it's necessary that the record show that, so that when we come to issues of debate regarding this matter, that it's clear that he's not participating in the debate. Councillor Harding had a conflict. So now the public hearing is closed, and we'll move directly then to the opening of the Municipal Council meeting for this evening, February 14th, and we'll begin the roll call for the council hearing, please. Would you indicate your attendance now? Councillor Windsor, perhaps you'd turn your mic off, sir. Councillor Meisner is present. Councillor Hurtle is present. Councillor Windsor is present. So everyone is accounted for with the exception of Councillor Harding, even though we did miss our buttons. Okay, thank you. We're looking for approval of the agenda for this evening. Is someone prepared to move approval of the agenda as circulated? Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Hurtle. Is there any discussion on the question? If there's none, I'm sorry, just hold on for a second. Councillor Meisner.
I was just wondering if we were going to excuse Councillor Harding's absence first.
We can do that perhaps after we deal with this motion. Okay,
perfect.
Thank you. Thanks for reminding me, though. No discussion on the motion. All those in favor or otherwise, please vote now. I'm hearing that Councillor Windsor is present. Councillor Windsor, how do you vote on this motion to approve the agenda? All right, he's left us for a moment. The motion is approved.
Yes, I just heard you ask how I voted, and I noted I voted in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The agenda is approved as circulated. Once the agenda has been approved, for those online who wish to understand the procedure as we go through it, it's necessary then that each councillor assess for themselves whether they feel that there's an item on the agenda with which they might have a conflict. And I'm looking now to all councillors and ask if anyone has a conflict, if they would please declare it now. No one has a conflict. That takes us to item 4, approval of the minutes of January 3rd and January 17th special council. January 3rd was a regular council meeting. I'm prepared to accept a motion to approve them both before we get into the question of new business. Is there a mover of the motion? Moved by Councillor Granger, seconded by Councillor Meisner. Discussion on the motion, Councillor Meisner?
I'm just wondering if we could excuse Councillor Harding.
Councillor Harding is away, or he would certainly appreciate this, I'm sure. Thank you for reminding me. Now, do we have a motion on the floor? No. For the approval of the minutes? Yes. Could we vote on that motion then before we deal with Councillor Harding? All those in favor or otherwise? Councillor Windsor, do you vote to approve the minutes?
I vote to approve.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, Mayor, while you opened my line there, if I was supposed to do anything to change my screen, because what I see now is just a presentation slide with the municipality of the County of Kings, that first slide, introductory slide. Was myself or Yanni supposed to do something to change that?
We will attempt to address that, Councillor, as we go forward. Now, could I have a motion, Councillor Meisner, to excuse the attendance of Councillor Harding? Moved by Councillor Meisner and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any discussion regarding the motion? The request is from Councillor Meisner. He had a conflict this evening with a work-related matter. It was Councillor Harding. All those in favor of the motion? Please vote now. Don't try to bring me back on track, Councillor Meisner. It's way too late in the evening.
I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you, Councillor. That being said, the motion is unanimously passed. Business arising from the minutes of January 3rd, 23. Does anybody notice any business arising from those minutes they'd like to raise? Any business arising from the minutes of the special council meeting of January the 17th? Seeing none, then we'll proceed directly to item 6, Planning Advisory Committee recommendations, January 10th, 2023, and I'll turn that over to Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Municipal Council gave final reading to the application to rezone lands on Hilts Road in Garland from the rural mixed-use A2 zone to the rural industrial M3 zone as shown in Appendix A of the report dated December 13th, 2022.
Thank you, Councillor. In discussion with the Councillor, we've decided that in the event, following public hearings, in the event that when these matters come before Council, that councillors be given an opportunity, if required, to ask any further questions of clarification. If some member of the public were to have presented something that they wanted more clarification from the presenter, this would be their opportunity to do that. So does anyone have any further question of clarification?
Then I so move.
Then the councillor so moves. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Allen. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor or otherwise of the motion, please vote now. The motion is passed. Councillor Windsor, how do you vote, sir? If you wish to be on record, Councillor Windsor, how do you vote on this motion?
I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. Moving to item B.
The Municipal Council gives second reading to the application to rezone 1070 Central Avenue, Greenwood, PID 5510950 from the mixed commercial residential C3 zone, the residential 1 and 2 R2 zone, and the residential multi-unit R3 zone to the general commercial C1 zone as described in Appendix D of the report dated December 13, 2022.
Thank you, and I would ask again any further questions of clarification by any councillor of the presenter.
I so move.
It's been moved. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Granger. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now. How do you vote, Councillor Windsor?
I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. The motion's passed unanimously. Thank you.
That Municipal Council gives second reading to the amendments to the municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw to institute the Growth Center of New Minas secondary plan as attached to the council agenda dated January the 17th, 2023.
Thank you, and I ask again of Council whether there's any further items of clarification that you wish to ask to the presenter. Seeing none.
I so move.
Seconder of the motion, the Deputy Mayor. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion?
I have discussion, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I want to draw attention to the letter that Councillor Dick Killam referred to earlier. This was, let me say, kind of a last gasp by our fire chief to say, we've got safety concerns and this doesn't work. What the fire chief is pointing out, and he had actually, I had brought this with a bunch of pictures to the mayor and to the CAO last week, and there was a suggestion that, and I don't know if the mayor did get to talk to the chief, but there was a suggestion that this should have a letter from the fire chief. The fire chief's point is that for him to fight a fire, he can't set up inside of a line that's 20 feet inside of a building. He can't set up there. He'd have to set up out in the street, and he'd have to do all of his aerial operation around lines, and the voltage, and those who are familiar with firefighting, I think we've got one firefighter and the wife of a firefighter here. The voltage is 12,000 volts in the top lines. There's 12,000 volts, then there's 240 volts, and then there's a bunch of commercial off communications cables. And the chief has been adamant all the way through, and his view was, why should I write another letter? They haven't listened to me so far. So I'm hoping that we're going to take his word, and I've seen no evidence that there was any attempt to say something contrary to the fire chief, or to say, look, we've looked to a higher authority than our fire chief, and this can be done, and done safely. He's going to be, Jim Redmond feels he's going to be in a position to either put his men in danger, or to have his men faced with the dilemma where they have to refuse an unsafe work situation where there could be a building burning, people in the building, and they face with the dilemma, do I rescue those people, or do I put myself and my crews at risk? And Jim has made it clear, and he can't be any clearer, that he doesn't want to be up and applying water with cables that's 12,000 volt flowing through, or operating aerial equipment with such high voltage. And I don't know how we can get it any clearer, and I don't understand why. I mean, when we do a development agreement, one of the things that we do is we ask the fire chief that supply the fire services whether there's any issues. And if the fire chief would indicate there was any issues, it would be dealt with. So when the fire chief is saying here, I can't do this, this is a dangerous situation, it's not possible. If you think about, and if you look at that picture, going down Commercial Street, those wires on the top carries 12,000 volts of electricity. So to expect that he can, well, first of all, he'd have to position outside. He can't position. There's rules about how close to a fire you can position to, which is based on the height of the building. You can't have a building collapse on your fire truck, or your men there in the heat of a fire and the paint blistering off your truck because you had to set up inside in a 20-foot, which I don't know how 20 feet is going to get you parking plus transportation lanes anyway. So we need to do something about this, and I am proposing, and the fire chief for the village of New Minas is saying that the minimum that would work for him is 50 feet. And so I am asking, he says, I favor a minimum setback of 50 feet and no maximum. Right now, our maximum is 50. So my suggestion would be that we approve, we amend this document to have a minimum of 50 and some other maximum. And I'm going to say, and Jim provided a listing of businesses that had other distance setbacks so that we could picture them. Like the Old Kent store was 101, the Superstore was 39, Cleves is 84, Cineplex is 109, All Noman Leisure was 90. So I'm going to suggest, and I would make the motion if someone would favor it, that we amend the plan to show a minimum of 50 feet and a maximum setback of 100. And I'm open to, I'd like to have a seconder or discussion on that. But I think it would be foolhardy on our part and disrespectful when the fire chief, who's got 50 years experience in the business and 40 years plus as a fire chief, that we're saying, no, you can do it. You go ahead, don't worry. So I'd like to have some help with it, how we get by. But those are not new concerns. And in fact, when this was handed off to PAC, the minutes of that last meeting, there were some concerns requiring a maximum front setback would cause the rear of the buildings to face the street, would cause issues of snow removal along public sidewalks, would eliminate space for landscaping, and would cause safety issues. So, you know, this is not introducing a new thing. This has been here, and I can't understand why it is still here when we've engaged in this level of consulting, and if we don't listen to this, we're turning a deaf ear
Thank you,
to what
Councillor.
our fire chief is saying. And we've been known to listen to fire chiefs. It's been part of our practice of approving things.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Killam. Councillor Killam, before you start, I might say for full disclosure and clarity that I did email the fire chief today and asked him specifically whether he was saying that I wanted him to clarify whether he was saying that either the firefighters or the public, whether there was a life and safety risk associated with either of them as applies to this setback. And his response was, in both cases he used the word may and in bold and underlined, was first of all, there was no safety risk to his firefighters because they knew how to fight fires of this sort without putting their people at risk. And it may cause difficulties in extracting people from the higher parts of the building if they had to be taken out with a bucket. So that was his clarification. So, Councillor Killam.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd be prepared to second the motion that Councillor Windsor brought up with respect to those setbacks, if we can go forward with it. Thank you.
Okay, so what
The whole notion,
I would ask Councillor Windsor, what I would ask first is whether or not you want to make that motion to amend now, or whether you want to hear the discussion on the main motion first and then have me come back to you for the amendment. It's entirely up to you.
well, we can hear the discussion, but the whole reason for that letter was a safety concern. I don't know, I'm not aware of seeing the fire chief's response back, but that was the whole point. 12,000 votes, and he's got to apply water, and he's got to have, if you can't fight a fire and you can't get a ladder in, there's safety issues to your staff and to the public that could be occupying the building. And this is not a new introduction. So I can wait for discussion, but that's the fire chief's letter, which I hope accompanies this all the way through.
It's your call, Councillor. Do you want to make the motion to amend now, or would you like to wait?
Well, let's hear if there's any further discussion on it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Meisner, any discussion on the motion?
No, sorry, not on the motion.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? No, there's been no amendment yet. Okay, Councillor, you can make your motion to amend.
Thank you, Mayor. I will make the motion to, as the chief has suggested, to make the minimum setback 50 feet, in which case, and I wish there was pictures supplied that showed him fighting the fire at Cleves and at Swiss Chalet and the like, where he set up at the front. But I would make the motion to set the minimum at 50 and the maximum at 100. Now, the chief suggested unlimited, which allows people to set it up according to their business. But I would call it at 100 feet.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Killam. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Windsor, did you want to put your position on the motion?
Yes, I think I have heard this all the way through. In the working group, the chief was part of the working group. That is why it's noted in the last minutes where it hadn't been attended to as an issue. And the lead-in sentence to that was, let me read what the lead-in sentence was. The working group reviewed the draft secondary plan, public setback on each topic, and additional context information as needed. And before that, Upland summarized the engagement methods used for the draft, survey, stakeholders, discussion, workshops, and online map. And this was a supplementary issue that was not resolved at the working group. And it has not been resolved since, and the chief has been adamant through. You saw the bunch of pictures, Mr. Mayor and Mr. CAO, that the chief provided to me. I didn't ask for them, he provided it to me. He's frustrated, which is why I suggested to you that he's going to say, why should I send another letter? No one has listened to me to date. So are we going to close a deaf ear to somebody in such a critical safety sensitive position as a fire chief, or are we going to heed what he says? And I can't, for in any good conscience, there's no joy in me bringing this up again. I wish there was an easy way, but I have to. I can't see we in good conscience could say, well, Mr. Chief, we understand what you wrote here, but anyway, here you are. Because I think if, I know Mr. Killam seconded it, Councillor Killam, he was a firefighter. He would know the danger of applying water with 12,000 volts all around you, or trying to put do aerial operations with that kind of voltage. They will go in over a 240 line, and I provided pictures showing that. They will go in over a 240 line, but at the top of the pole there, we have lines on each side carrying 12,000 volts. Not only that, he'd have to set up out in the street, and in the winter there could be a 10-foot snowbank to get over, and to try and deal with the fire. So what he's asking, and he has said to me, I can't set up to fight a fire in 20 feet.
Okay. Councillor Granger.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In looking at the list of commercial setbacks, the closest one is McDonald's, which is 53 feet. So 50 feet feels kind of right to me. I do actually agree with you, Councillor Windsor. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Sorry, I turned my own mic off. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I will not be supporting this motion. I've spoken against this from the very beginning. And I, just like it brings Councillor Windsor no joy to bring it up again, I also feel no joy in having this discussion again. Because every community comes in different shapes and sizes. There's no standard by which we are, like downtown Halifax, they manage to fight fires. Canning, Kingston, Kentville, there's so many communities here in Kings County that there are buildings with a setback of less than 50 feet. And while I appreciate the concerns and I appreciate the sentiment behind them, I disagree that this is something that we have failed to consider, or that this is something that is somehow in error. So we approached this, and I really appreciated Mr. Watson's characterization that we had a vision. Let's start it as Vision New Minas, but what we want the community to look like. And there's a few ways to achieve that, but one of the most meaningful is to eliminate this parking in front of the building, walking through rows and rows and rows and rows of cars to get into a front door, to create a walkable place where people feel comfortable. I walked the other day in downtown New Minas. It was a very bad experience. And there's ways to make it better. This is one of the ways to make it better. I don't ever want to disregard someone's professional experience. However, I think we have professionals who have told us that this is acceptable and that there are communities who look like this where they fight fires and they do it safely. And those people are our planners and the consultants that we've hired. And there's a reason that when this came forward the way it is, that those were the setbacks that were proposed. So I stand by them. I stand by the work of the committee. And I hope you all do too. Thank you.
Sorry for the delay. I turn my light off always so the camera will go to the speaker rather than to me. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Killam?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment, I guess. I've been on the top of those ladders before, and it's not a good feeling up there. And I've been to a couple fires that, in fact, one in Centerville, where there were a lot of explosive items that were sending barrels up through the roof and into the areas of an aerial ladder, and luckily nobody was hurt. But I guess I'm supporting this because it's coming from an experienced fire chief, and if there was other arguments against doing this from other professionals, I'd gladly listen to. So, but as it stands, I'm stand by my second. Thank you.
Councillor Meisner.
I guess it is my understanding that you told us that you spoke with the fire chief, was it yesterday?
No, I haven't spoken with the fire
Okay.
chief. This letter arrived in my inbox, and I then responded to the fire chief by email and asked him specifically
Okay.
whether there were life safety concerns with respect to either firemen. What was he saying?
Yes.
Was he saying to me that there were life safety problems either associated with firefighters or with civilians in the building? And he said his response to me was that there was no problem with safety of firefighters because they controlled that and they would be safe. But he said there may be difficulty getting people out of higher buildings with a bucket truck if they couldn't access it other than over the lines. So that responds to your question. I'm not entering debate yet.
So what I'm hearing from you is that he doesn't have any concrete safety concerns with this from that response. That's what I'm hearing.
I can only tell you what he said.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion?
Peter, I'd like to interject again at some
Then
point.
I'll speak on it first, Councillor, since you've already spoken on it, and you have the right to speak last on the motion. I was concerned that I would have an official letter from a fire department with respect to this issue, and that's the reason I went back for clarification to the chief. I remain concerned that we have this expression of concern, particularly because it comes from the fire chief, and I would much prefer to have both his letter and his response to my email before council prior to making a decision on this, as well as confirmation from him and/or the Fire Safety Committee or whomever becomes involved in this, that there is a life safety issue associated with this type of a setback before I would make a decision on it. So I would be, I'd be grateful if someone would consider tabling the motion until such time as those responses were considered, that is, tabling both motions until those responses are considered, but I'm at your pleasure if you wish to proceed with the motions. Councillor Meisner's light's on first.
I would move to table this. Fire Services Advisory Committee meets this week, so there's an opportunity for a quick turnaround in terms of further discussion, in terms of tabling this and coming with an actual concrete issue, concrete concern one way or the other when the fire chiefs as a whole are able to meet and have this discussion. Excellent.
And I would second that. I would second that tabling motion. I'm just wondering if, at the same time, we could ask how our consultant reconciled that there was no safety issue all the way through this.
No, that's
At the
not.
same time,
That's
bring
that's
that
not.
information.
That's not in order with respect to the motion, Councillor. You've seconded the motion to table. Is there any anything further, Councillor, that you wish to say with respect to the motion? No, we're not debating it.
I'd like to just say, you say that doesn't necessarily apply, but we're going to bank our vote
Well,
on
Councillor,
whether or
Councillor,
not.
you've already seconded the motion to table, so what we're doing here is taking a pause so that we can get further information from the fire safety people to assure ourselves that rather than get a letter 24 hours before we meet and then an email response 6 hours, 7 hours before we meet, that we have full information in order to make a decision. So the motion to table, I'll take the motion to table on the amendment first, and then we'll consider a motion to table on the main motion. All those in favor of the motion to table the amendment, please vote now. Councillor Windsor, are you voting in favor?
I vote to table the motion, Mayor.
Thank you. The motion's passed unanimously. Now to the main motion. Do I have a motion to table the main motion? Moved by Councillor Hertel, seconded by Councillor Meisner. No discussion on a tabling motion. All those in favor or otherwise? We'll just wait for this voting table to be taken down. Long pause. It's what we used to call dead air. Somebody always has to fill the dead air. That's what I'm doing now, rambling while we take, yes, okay. All those in favor or otherwise of the motion to table the main motion, please vote now.
And Mr. Mayor, I vote in the affirmative.
All right, then the motion is passed. Deputy Mayor, you haven't voted. Did you wish to? I did vote again. You're voting in favor? No, I vote again. I'm sorry. So I have 2 negative votes. All right, I'm sorry, I missed those. I tend not to go to the right very, very often. Not that I go to the left all that often, but. So where we are with this particular item is that these 2 motions, the main motion and the motion to amend, are tabled until such time as we're able to get enough information to satisfy ourselves in this process that we have not made a decision that is against public safety. And we're looking to our Deputy CAO, who meets with the Fire Advisory Committee, to come back, to put the question to them and to come back with us, to us with a response. Have I captured that adequately, or does someone else wish to comment? I see no further comments, so that's where we are on this particular item. The matter will be delayed until such time as we have that answer and can make a decision, and in the meantime we'll advise the village of New Minas that we're unable to approve their secondary plan pending this particular item. Item D, the application to rezone properties in Cambridge. I'm sorry I don't have your light on. There you go.
Thank you. That Municipal Council give first reading to and hold a public hearing regarding the application to rezone the properties located at 5783 and 5811 Highway 1, PID 553795507 and PID 55158273, Cambridge, from the residential 1 and 2 unit R2 zone to the residential multi-unit R4 zone as described in Appendix A of the report dated January 10, 2023.
Thank you. Any further questions of clarification for staff on this particular matter from council? Seeing none.
I so move.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hurtle. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please vote, or otherwise, please vote now.
Mr. Mayor, I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. The motion is passed unanimously. Thank you.
That Municipal Council give initial consideration to and hold a public hearing regarding entering into a development agreement to permit an expanded home-based business at 85 Middle Dyke Road, PID 553900694, Kentville, as described in Appendix D of the report dated January 10, 2023.
Thank you. Now, this is an older item. Has anybody got any further questions of clarification of any of the planners?
I so move.
Thank you. Seconder for the motion, seconded by Councillor Allen. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Mr. Mayor, I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. That's passed unanimously in that case. Thanks very much, Councillor Armstrong. With the next public hearing date?
Tuesday, March 7th, 6 p.m. in these chambers.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7, administration, a proclamation request regarding World Down Syndrome Day, and Madam Clerk is going to present on that. Or is she?
Yes, I am. I just had to turn on my mic there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a recommendation that Council proclaim March 21st, 2023, World Down Syndrome Day in the municipality of the County of Kings. And I just want to point out that there will be a proclamation and flag raising event here at the municipal building, but that will be on March 20th at 10 a.m. And that's because March 21st is Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. Did anybody have any questions of the clerk on that particular item? Councillor Meisner?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that in our joint accessibility document, we have my friend Rachel, who has Down syndrome, and Rachel's birthday was just this past week. Rachel's in bed right now. I'm sure she's not listening to council, but I wanted to wish her a happy birthday while we make this proclamation so that her mom can listen to it with her in the morning, and hope she will join us.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure we all join in wishing her a happy birthday, and we're on record, so she can watch it again and again and again. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, I'm sorry, I got to get your light for you.
It's okay, thank you, Mayor. I would ask that if we could maybe extend a formal symbolic invitation to Mayor McDougall of CBRM, whose son Emmett has Down syndrome, and she is quite a champion for the Down syndrome community. Emmett's a good friend of mine, and I think it would be nice to extend that invitation to her. Not expecting her to make the trip from Sydney, but just to include them in our celebrations.
Thank you. You and I can have a discussion regarding that as to who pens the letter. I'd be happy to do it, but I'm sure she'd appreciate one coming from you. Renewal of Honorary Piper, Madam Clerk.
I don't think we have a motion yet, and we didn't vote yet.
Sorry, on the Down syndrome proclamation, which proposed that the motion be that Municipal Council proclaim the 21st of March 2023 World Down Syndrome Day in the municipality of the County of Kings. Do I have a mover? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Meisner. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor or contrary-minded, please vote now.
Mr. Mayor, I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hurdle being absent from his seat, the motion is passed unanimously. Sorry. Madam Clerk, I got ahead of you. Renewal of Honorary Piper.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You probably all know Mr. Ed Coleman. He's been the Honorary Piper for the municipality for many years. Happy to say that he is still piping. Of course, there's been a bit of an absence of events during COVID, but he indicated that he is still active, and we would therefore like to recommend that Council confirm his reappointment as the Honorary Piper for the municipality.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. It's therefore proposed that Municipal Council confirm the reappointment of Ed Coleman as Honorary Piper for the municipality of the County of Kings. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Granger. Thank you. All those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
Mr. Mayor, I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you, Councillor. That being the case, we have a unanimous resolution to appoint the gentleman, our Honorary Piper, once again. Moving to item C, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to share a presentation here so that Councillor Windsor can see it. Hopefully I'm doing that right. And you should be able to see it now too. All right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My next item is on the fascinating topic of records management. And it's regarding a consultant for a document organization structure. And if you'll permit, I'll present from here so that I can keep an eye on everything else that's going on here. The recommendation, I'll start off with that, is that Municipal Council direct the CAO to issue a request for proposals and engage a consultant to develop a document organization structure. So in terms of background, as I'm sure you know, records management is an important and also a legislated aspect of municipal government. It's legislated under the MGA Section 34. Council made it a core program enhancement in the 2018-2021 strategic plan. A lot has happened since then. The first step was to have created a records management specialist position. That was in July 2019. Lily Ashdown assumed that role in January 2020. A consultant was engaged in March 2020, and that was to assist us in developing a policy and a retention and disposition schedule, and those were adopted by Council in October 2020. Since then, SharePoint was selected as the software for records management. The records management specialist then spent a number of months encoding the retention schedule into SharePoint. That was very time consuming. In September 2021, SharePoint and also Teams and OneDrive were introduced to all staff, and they have been in use by staff, mostly to become familiar with that software. But to date, there's no formal structure yet, so formal file structure is not in place yet. And we're at a point right now that structure needs to be developed. So that's a document organization structure. That's an important step because we already have many SharePoint sites having been created and teams created, but not in any kind of organized way yet. And the further along that gets, the more work we need to do to get everything organized that's already been created. We are looking for some expertise to help us develop such a structure, and we therefore propose engaging a consultant through a request for proposals. In terms of financial implications, we would like to propose finding some capacity in the current operating budget. Again, it is a bit time sensitive. We are already using the software, and so the sooner we can get a structure in place, the better. Our finance department therefore found the required funds in the outside engineering account. We're expecting the cost to be approximately $40,000. So that is where the funds would come from for that consultant. In terms of next steps, if Council approves the recommendation, we would issue an RFP. The consultant would then develop the document organization structure in consultation with relevant staff. The records management specialist would then build that structure within SharePoint. That would be followed by staff training on the use of that structure in SharePoint and in combination with retention labels. So each record would have a label attached that would automatically determine the disposition of that record. And the final and important step would be to migrate all documents from our current network drives to SharePoint. So we're really in a transition phase right now between using network drives and SharePoint. So again, the recommendation is that Municipal Council direct the CAO to issue a request for proposals and to engage a consultant to develop a document organization structure as outlined in the February 14, 2023 request for decision. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the clerk on her presentation? Seeing none, is someone prepared to move the motion? Moved by the Deputy Mayor. It is seconded by Councillor Meisner. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor or otherwise of the motion, please vote now.
Mr. Mayor, I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. That being the case, the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you. And I was just coming to that point in the meeting where, and it seems to me be finance that always gets cut off at this point, as to whether you would like to have your break now or plow through to the in-camera matter, but I'm looking now at a full page following this one, so perhaps a break now would be appropriate. I declare a 15-minute recess. Evening, Council. Calling you back to order after our brief break, and we're at that point on the agenda under item 8, Financial Services. And Mr. Barr is here to make us give us a presentation on this matter. Mr. Barr, I'll get your light on. There you go, sir, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council. Apologize for my voice issues, but this is a fairly straightforward RFD, so it should be pretty easy to get through. Until I have technology issues.
Should I sing or anything to just... No. It's been voted unanimously that that won't take place. Okay, Mr. Barr, go ahead.
All right, thank you. So this RFD is in relation to Valley Waste requesting that the municipality approve a guarantee resolution in the amount of $128,621, which represents the municipality's share of the total $174 that's to be borrowed. So what it relates to is Valley Waste seeking to use debenture financing to fund a number of their capital purchases they've made recently in relation to a truck and plow, automated scale house window, a utility trailer, and scale software totaling $174,000. So all of these, if you remember them, they're all items that have come before council before. It was part of a previous budget and previous guarantee resolution. So Valley Waste has to, in order to receive debenture financing through MFC, there has to be an approved temporary borrowing resolution from the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and that only is valid for 12 months, and it has expired since the original one was passed by, the guarantee resolution was passed by council for that TBR. So simply the temporary borrowing resolution has to be renewed before they can secure debenture financing for these items. So therefore, a new guarantee resolution from the municipality has to be undertaken. So with this, there's no financial implications for the municipality, except in the case of any kind of default by Valley Waste. In that case, the municipal parties would be responsible for their share of the net debt. And guarantees do not factor into the municipal financial condition indicators, or they don't impact the municipality's ability to borrow either, so there's no direct financial implications. So then quite simply, the recommendation is just that Municipal Council approve the Valley Region Solid Waste Resource Management Authority guarantee resolution as attached to the request for decision dated February 14th, 2023 in the amount of $120,621.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. Is someone prepared to move the motion? Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Hurtle. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now. Councillor Windsor, how are you voting on this motion?
I vote in the affirmative, Mayor.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Thanks, Mr. Barr. Moving on to page 2 of your agenda. Committee of the Whole recommendations from January the 17th, 2023. We're beginning with 9A, which is the funding agreement with the Kings County Seniors Safety Society. It's been recommended by Committee of the Whole that Municipal Council enter into a new funding agreement with the Kings County Senior Safety Society, as was outlined in the January 17th, 2023 request for decision. Do I have a mover of the motion? Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing Deputy Mayor Lutz.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just say that this is some of the most worthwhile work that the county does, is through funding these individual organizations that do the really hard on-the-ground stuff. And I don't know when this will come back to us again for consideration in a couple of years. But I would just say that at that time, I would even think another bump would be a good thing, because the work they do is so important to the community. So just wanted to make sure that was on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other comment or debate? All those in favor or otherwise of the motion, please vote now.
And I vote in the affirmative, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Windsor. Motion's passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item B. It's been recommended by a Committee of the Whole that Municipal Council provide a maximum 7.7% increase in funding to fire departments providing fire protection services within the municipality, which are not currently under contract for the 2023-2024 budget year. Do I have a mover of the motion? Moved by Councillor Meisner. Seconded by Councillor Allen. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please vote now. How do you vote, Councillor Windsor?
And I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. The motion's passed unanimously. Thank you. Going on to item C, it's been recommended to us from Committee of the Whole that Municipal Council direct the CAO to bring forth proposals for consistent honorariums for volunteer firefighters as part of a new fire funding policy. Do I have a mover of that motion? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by... No, I'm not going with any of you guys. I'm going with Councillor Killam as the seconder. Any debate on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
And I vote in the affirmative, Mayor.
Thank you. Therefore, it's unanimous in its approval. Item 9D. It's been recommended that Municipal Council receive the Capital Accountability Report for the period ended March 31st, 2022 as attached to the December 13th, 2022 Budget and Finance Committee agenda as an information item. A mover of the motion, Councillor Armstrong, thank you. Councillor Granger seconds. All those in favor or otherwise, please vote now. It's just a matter of receiving for information. Just checking to verify that I did vote. Councillor Windsor, how do you vote, sir?
In the affirmative, Mayor.
Thank you. It's therefore unanimously approved. Moving on then to item E. It's been recommended that Municipal Council receive the Capital Accountability Report, this is the Capital Accountability Report for the period ended June 30th, 2022 as attached to the December 13th, 2022 Budget and Finance Committee agenda as an information item. It's moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now. How do you vote, Councillor Windsor?
And I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. The motion's passed unanimously. And the last item under recommendations from Committee of the Whole is that Municipal Council receive the General Operating Accountability Report for the period ended September 30th, 2022 as attached to the December 13th, 2022 Budget and Finance Committee agenda as an information item. Mover of the motion? Nobody wants to move the motion. Councillor Meisner, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
And I vote in the affirmative, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. That being the case, the motion's passed unanimously if Councillor Hurtle voted in favor. And he indicates that he did. So that's the all the Committee of the Whole recommendations. We're moving now to Police Services Advisory Committee recommendations, and Councillor Hurtle is going to carry the the ball on that one. Councillor Hurdle, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it is that the Municipal Council accepts staff advice related to bylaw number 84, noise control bylaw contained in the December 16th, 2022 briefing.
You move that motion?
And I so move.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Allen, any discussion on the motion? Councillor Armstrong.
I don't know what this is. Did I miss something? Did I miss December 16th?
Councillor Hurdle, what is the...
Is this something from the Police Advisory Committee, or is this something that came through us?
It was a briefing at the Police Advisory Committee meeting, and I believe the CAO has information on that if you'd like further.
Okay, I must just miss it. Thank you.
Mr. CIO, would you wish to comment?
Thank you, Your Mayor. Through you to the councillor. So council sent a councillor item was referred to Police Services Advisory on September the 20th, and we made a staff presentation to the Police Advisory Committee on December 16th. And specifically it relates to a change in the MGA that allows municipalities to amend their bylaws to pursue noise infractions on motor vehicles. I can give you more detail if you'd like.
Well, no, I'm just curious that this motion is, this is the first time we're saying this. So technically we don't know anything about this, right? I mean, I was being asked to pass the motion that I know absolutely nothing about. Or did we see something on this before?
You did see this through a councillor item, so it was discussed as part of a councillor item, and it was referred to Police Advisory Committee for recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any further questions of the CAO on this particular item? Deputy Mayor?
I was equally confused as to Councillor Armstrong, but if you click, it's a clickable PDF, and you can get to the Friday, December 16th meeting of the Police Services Advisory Committee, which has further information, and that wasn't obviously clear at the beginning when I went through this, but there is a briefing in there, so. Okay.
Thank you for the additional information. Do we have a mover and seconder, Madam Clerk? Yes. Any discussion on the motion? Other than that, what we've heard? If not, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now. Councillor Windsor?
And I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. That's unanimously passed. Thank you. Item 11, Board and Committee Reports. Kings Point-to-Point Transit Board. Councillor Harding is absent this evening, so we'll hear from him next week, or next meeting, rather. Item B, Kings Remo Regional Emergency Management Advisory Committee. Mr. Stovall has presented his report in writing. I think what I would like to do is just review these and then come back and ask for a motion. Committee of Council verbal reports. Are there any verbal reports from any councillors? Seeing none, any reports regarding external boards and committees verbally? Seeing none, then I'm asking for a motion to receive the board and committee reports as presented. Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Meisner. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor or otherwise, please vote now. Councillor Windsor, how do you vote, sir?
Affirmative.
Thank you. That being said, the motion is unanimously passed. Moving on to Correspondence, if I could have a motion to receive the 3 items of correspondence highlighted in the agenda. Moved by Councillor Hertel, seconded by Councillor Meisner. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor or otherwise, please vote now. And as we wait for the results of the vote, one letter dated January the 10th was regarding Municipal and Village Code of Conduct consultation, where there's consultations going on regarding a proposed province-wide code of conduct for municipalities and villages. And item B was the letter of thank you from Glooscap Elementary, and item C, a letter of thank you from Horton High regarding the food funding that this municipality provides to our schools in our region. The motion, Councillor Hertel, you had something on the motion.
Just a question, if you knew specifically with the consultation schedule, the Kings region, the in-person is scheduled for February 22nd. Do you know what the location of that is?
I don't have it in front of me unless it's in the materials.
It's here.
It's right here.
It's here.
Here. Okay, thanks.
It's in this room. I didn't know whether you were pointing to your desk saying you had the schedule.
It is actually here in Orchards, in the Orchards room.
Okay, thank you. From both Councillor Hertel and I. So that's item 12. Item 13, is there any other business to come before the meeting? It's proposed, of course, it will be proposed before we adjourn, that we go into an in-camera meeting to discuss a contractual matter, but it's not anticipated that we will be coming out of that meeting to pass any particular motions. It's more for discussion and information at that meeting at this particular stage. So under other business, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Mattart. One thing, or two things actually. The first being that it strikes me that when we had the conversation earlier regarding the secondary plan, that we didn't get to, per the process, and rightfully so, didn't get to really hear from staff during that. So I would just request that when we revisit the untabled motion, that we also hear from staff on their position regarding the current setbacks and the rationale behind them and the implications of changing them and how they relate to other setbacks within the county. So if we could just hear some of those things from staff at that point, I would appreciate it. The second thing is a number of municipalities across the province are writing letters or speaking out to the provincial government about Bill 225, which is the bill that the provincial government passed regarding the Halifax Charter that allowed the province to nullify any bylaw within 6 months if it was deemed to impact housing or housing development. So East Hants, Truro, Colchester, and HRM have all written letters to the province. I didn't come tonight prepared with a motion, and I should have put in an agenda item regarding to this. But I did just want to, I guess, float it to council and let them know that that it is something I will likely bring up at a later date. And if folks want to look into it further, I think it might be worth us lending our voices to the issue, particularly around the idea of municipal autonomy and supporting, I guess, because this bill only impacts one municipality in our province who have their own separate charter from the MGA, it might be worth expressing some solidarity with Halifax because they often speak out on broader municipal issues that don't affect them necessarily, but affect the broader municipal landscape. So I just wanted to bring those two things forward and give you warning that I may be bringing a motion forward regarding writing a letter regarding Bill 225. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Mayor, may I offer a comment under other business?
Yes, go ahead.
First of all, I want to say it's great to see Councillor Killam back and see him on deck again, and I hope that's a good indicator of an improved health. And second, I agree with with the Deputy Mayor totally.
Thank you. Well, I think your first point, Deputy Mayor, is we don't need a motion for that. We can anticipate that staff will bring their their voice back to council on that issue. And on your second matter, rather than considering a warning, I'll consider it a notice that you plan to bring a motion. And I understand the point of view of the people, the municipalities that you've referred to. It's very much a one-way street between the province and the municipalities, and it's worth reflecting on. Any other business to come before the meeting? Seeing none, and there being no public in the room, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn and to go into in-camera without coming back. Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Granger. All those in favor or otherwise, please vote now.
And Mayor, I'm affirmative.
Thank you. The motion's passed unanimously. We are in.